Ladies and gents, welcome to today's auction. We have advertised that we commence the auction at 12 o'clock, but as has been, there we are, much better. As has been the modus operandi now for the last 2 years, we have a guest speaker that anchors our auction and opens with discussion around contemporary thinking and insight around trends in the marketplace. Today, Stephan Vries will be joining us. He's sitting up front, and I'll make a proper introduction to him shortly. We will have probably about 20 minutes or so with Stephan. We will open the floor to some Q&A, but it is our intention to get the auction underway no later than 12:30. To start and just frame the conversation with Stephan today, to note that High Street has been very, very active as a service provider to the turnaround, restructuring and insolvency industry and their practitioners. We've got an exceptional body of work, a great showcase of work and success across all of the real estate segments, whether it be retail, industrial, resi or commercial, in this liquidation and business rescue space. Some of the more memorable transactions include the sale or disposal of the liquidated Kyalami racetrack for 205 million. Thanks, Stephan. Acknowledgement of a great result. And the disposal of a business or a bank construction for the Clifton Mansion for 96 million. Both of these, I believe, remain standing South African auction records, so very, very proud of those results. We're also a member of SARIPA, the South African Restructuring and Insolvency Practitioners Agency or Association. Today they have some of their banners up, some of their staff were here a bit earlier, and they had to rush off to another engagement. We're very proud to announce the fact that we are sponsoring one of their first events next year, the Insolvency Summit in February 2025. So we're very, very keenly invested in the ongoing growth and participation in the business rescue, liquidations, insolvency space. And to that end, we have our guest speaker this morning. Stephan is an admitted attorney, practicing legal attorney, but on top of that, he's also a practitioner in the business rescue and insolvency space. He works for a very competent company down in the Western Cape called Summit Trust. We've done some good work with Stephan, and it's great to have him on the podium. You will see that Stephan is a young guy making an impact on the industry. And that's something that High Street is always very keen to support, is disruptors, people that are making an impact, and the youthful exuberance of competent people moving into an industry. Stephan, to that end, is currently the chairman of the SARIPA Young Guns in the Western Cape. But he's also actively, as I say, working with the likes of Insol and others as a business rescue practitioner, insolvency practitioner, where he's helping shape policy in this space. So I'm very proud and privileged to host Stephan today. He's going to share some of his insights. One thing that I must impress upon everybody is that High Street provides a very viable and effective platform for optimal value realization for distressed assets. And Stephan's target, or his topic today, will be transparency and fairness in the disposal of distressed assets. So we're very aligned to the topic today, and I'm looking forward to your commentary. So a very warm welcome to Stephan.
Right, thank you, Greg, and good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Like Greg said, I am Stephan Vries. I'm an insolvency and business rescue practitioner. I'm an admitted attorney, but I'm non-practicing currently, just to clarify that. But to address the elephant in the room, yes, I am fairly young. I have been in the industry for about 5 years, and when Greg asked me to give a short address, I was really daunted by the idea of it. I mean, before me on these high street auctions, you've had MBAs, you've had PhDs, you've had real economic impact makers, and now you have me, so we'll take it as it is. But I'm very privileged. In the short span of my career, I have been working with the finest of insolvency practitioners, business rescue practitioners, bankers, attorneys, and I'm happy to be able to say that I also receive support from all the major financial institutions. So I have been busy, and I am graying already. And so I thought today, how about I give a newcomer's thought on, the whole business rescue and insolvency distressed asset sales. And it's a particular aspect that piques my interest. And essentially what I want to discuss is what I'd like to see in the future. I also want to mention that my thoughts and opinions expressed here today are those of my own. I do not speak for Summer Trust, I do not speak for High Street, or I don't speak for the whole industry in general. But I like to think that my sentiments here resonate with them as well. But let me start off by setting the scene of a distressed asset sale. We're here in a unique position. We're at the impasse between challenge or adversity and opportunity for some, where difficulties faced by some become potential prospects for others. We should bear in mind that what we witness in a distressed asset sale is the culmination of years of hard work, of blood, sweat, and tears, to use the old cliche. But due to various circumstances or reasons, your company, well, mainly outside or inside your own control, your company or your estate might find itself in financial distress or even in insolvency. So, now what? In comes this grinning idiot with the shiny suit, followed by a very street-smart auctioneer. Backhanders, front-handers. How about a nice new dining room set for the wife? A good deal for a good friend, but you'll get me next time, hey? Unfortunately, that is the public perception of a distressed asset sale. Sell it for cheap, and who's buying the drinks afterwards? Fire sale. How do we all detest that phrase? But let's not beat around the bush. In recent years, our industry, the world of insolvency and business rescue, has faced its fair share of scrutiny. There have been times when public confidence has wavered, and when the actions of a few have cast a shadow upon the many. But what I want to talk about is what we're doing now to try and dispel that shadow and uplift the industry again. So, distressed asset sale is not the opportunity to make a couple of easy bucks off the demise of others. The process demands the utmost integrity and professionalism from each role player, whether that role player be the liquidator, the business rescue practitioner, the master of the High Court, or the High Court. Any compromise in that sequence of events will compromise the whole system, which in turn has even far more reaching consequences. To a certain extent, wavering investor confidence, shaky securities, collapse of financial institutions. I may be a bit dramatic, but we all know that debt makes the world go around, and being able to recover on debt, or at least to a certain extent being able to recover on debt, is a central tenet into any functioning economy. So the disposal asset is a critical part of my work, and it's an area where we have the opportunity to demonstrate our commitment to the principles of transparency, fairness. And today's auction, for example, is not about the transfer of assets. It's about conducting business in a way that is open, equitable, and without reproach. Your presence here is a testament to what we can accomplish when we are all transparent. Now, there's a couple of options a practitioner can choose to dispose of a distressed asset. Each has its own pros and its own cons. You can choose to opt for an auction, either public like this one. You can choose for a private boardroom auction, a private tender, open tender, considering a pre-pack, or you can negotiate a private treaty sale. That's only just to name a few. There's a lot of options out there. Now, each of these have varying levels in transparency. And it's up to the insolvency practitioner or the business rescue practitioner is to walk the tightrope between how to keep the process as transparent as possible, whilst on the other hand, trying to be fair towards the asset and the creditors and all the stakeholders in general. So, for instance, in a public auction, and in my opinion, it's probably the best suited for auctions such as for real estate, for industrial to a certain extent as well, and to agricultural properties. But it might not always be the best contender in every case. Now, I mean, I call upon the high street guys to show me wrong on this. But let's say, for instance, you're sitting with an asset that's difficult to value, merely because it has value to only a specific part of people, a very, very specific part of people in a very specific industry. Now, let's take a stupid example, like you have an online lingerie store, and you had a lot of subscribers. It faced a sheer set of difficulties, but now the guy in the sleazy suit approaches. Myself, I mean, I was fairly recently in a scenario like this, has now a couple of options to choose from. And in this instance, I mean, you have to realize that this subscriber base does have value because, I mean, a lot of marketing has gone into it, years of it. You have a subscriber base of thousands of people who are interested in a very specific product. Now, in this instance, what I've seen is what you can do is you create a private tender process whereby each individual or specific company that might be interested in this asset will then deliver a private treaty to you. Now, obviously, they only know, like, what is this asset's value to them, because they only know what their internal operations can accommodate, whether this can mean a substantial increase in revenue and a growth of business, or maybe we'll see where it goes. Then at a certain stage, on a certain deadline, you can decide on, okay, we open all the private tenders, we read them out, and we accept the highest offer. This has some transparency in it, but you got to be in mind who opens the tenders. It's usually the insolvency practitioners, or sometimes you can have an independent third party opening the tenders and then selecting. And we've had successes in the past, no comebacks as of yet. Another disposal strategy that we see now and then, but especially in offshore jurisdictions, is that of a pre-pack. Now, a pre-pack, I'm sure most of you are aware, is a deal that was negotiated prior to the onset of insolvency. And then when the liquidator or the BRP or whatever he or she is called in that jurisdiction gets into office, can consider the deal, hopefully impartially and transparently, and sign it off. But this has a bit of an issue because your sideline creditors, the guys at the back of the queue, feel they kind of been left out of the process, that this is a sort of a phoenix company that's rising again from the ashes. It's them that was a reason for insolvency, and now they're kind of just buying it back via. So a lot of jurisdictions has fairly high pre-requirements to be able to sign off on a pre-pack, arm's length transactions, and you have to kind of tick certain boxes in that regard. But the approach has benefits. Speed, reduced cost, and you maintain the value of the business as you can keep it as a going concern. But I mean, these examples, I mean, they just demonstrate the delicate balance between trying to maintain transparency, but also to do your duty towards the asset and the interests of the general body of creditors. Does the principle of transparency really entitle all the potential purchasers to have insight into the purchase prices being offered? Now, I mean, I think you can argue it both ways. But at that stage, I think we have to kind of consider the principle of fairness and reasonableness. Now, fairness and reasonableness can also not be a tick box exercise. What is fair in one scenario might not particularly be fair in another. So, for example, in a case of a creditor holding security over an asset, we'll see that in most of the major financial institutions. And in that case, the financial institution, and it's fairly governed by law, has the right to nominate which kind of disposal process we have to follow, and even goes so far as to nominate the auctioneer. Usually off a panel system, which they annually update, and it's just the next guy, and the next guy, I'm assuming. But this also poses a bit of a question, in that your insolvency practitioner doesn't have the discretion, in that we are appointed to do a specific job, and to kind of decide, really get stuck into it and decide what are we dealing with here, and why do we want to go a specific route. Flip side of the argument is that in that case, the insolvency practitioner or the BRP can always say, well, the bank decided on going this route, and if it is a massive disaster, you can always say, well, you guys decided to go this route, and you guys selected him. But again, the issue is with the creditors at the back of the queue. Now, they're usually not happy, they do not want to be sidelined, and when disposal of asset has been complete, they always come with amazing stories of, if the insolvency practitioner did so-and-so, we would have all been settled. I mean, damned if you do and damned if you don't, and hindsight is always 20/20. From my perspective, it's up to the role players, the auctioneers and the insolvency practitioners, the BRPs, to really synergize together and exercise keen judgment on what should be fair and reasonable in a particular instance. Am I showing bias towards a certain creditor or a certain purchaser, for that matter? And is my actions or my omissions has a detrimental effect to anyone else? I think that's the sort of questions that should be running through your mind when you are even considering a matter from the start. And especially when you get to the disposal process, in that oftentimes you will see that the banks are maybe slightly overexposed and that their security is not as highly valued as they would have liked it to be back a couple of years ago. I mean, that's different altogether. There seems to be a bit of a disconnect between when creating the deal with the bank, they always want to value their own asset fairly high. Well, it's probably the marketing team that wants to do that because they want to write a big loan. But then when they get to us and we tell them, well, I mean, the asset might not be that much worth, there's always a bit of an issue. But I mean, be that as it may, what happens often is that your creditor, your secured creditor, is overexposed and the asset just doesn't realize enough to settle even the secured creditor. In that instance, is it really of a consequence to consider the back of the line creditors? I think it does. I think you have to be able to take accountability for your own actions and consider the deal that you've just taken out, and if there's comebacks offered, to be able to explain to whoever's asking on why you did what you did. But I mean, we're not infallible. We make mistakes. We say or do the wrong thing at the wrong time. But at the end of another disposal process, we should ask ourselves, what can we do better next time? How can we make the process fairer and more transparent? Did I exercise my judgment on a reasonable basis, or did I just shoot it off and hope for the best? Now, that's more of a virtue. We have to really consider it, and being virtuous in that regard, considering the real principles of transparency and reasonableness and fairness, keep it up. Think about it all the time, throughout the whole process. But I mean, that's enough philosophizing. What happens if it is evident that a particular role player is not that virtuous? That something smells fishy, something is fishy, and you can prove it. And you've been harmed. What do you do then? Well, one option to do is you can run off to court, but bear in mind, I mean, it's a double-edged blade, in that you do it at your own peril. I mean, just within this week, we've successfully batted an interdict against one of our auctions that we've arranged, properly constituted, properly advertised, by an interested party who essentially just wanted us to force us to rubber stamp on a deal that they've negotiated prior to insolvency, and making all kinds of accusations that, well, you're not considering us, but the courts are hesitant to interfere too much in the discretion of the liquidators. I mean, at the end of the day, we are officers of the court, so we do have a duty towards everyone around. So they are not that keen to interfere too much. If we tick the boxes, if we did whatever's right by way of the law, then we have to do what we have to do. So in that instance, they got a bit of a hiding, and we got a cost order against them. So we'll see what happens at the end of the day. You can also report insolvency practitioners, especially insolvency practitioners, to the Master of the High Court. Now, they have fairly wide-ranging powers. They are our overseeing body, and they have the power to actually call us in to an inquiry in front of them, get us under oath, and then really grill on what you did here and why you did what you did. in my short experience, I have never seen it, or if there is something like that going in the background, I haven't heard of it yet. And I think you can make your own deductions off that on whether that process is really followed. And I think that's why I come to my next point, is that I think probably the most effective way of keeping an insolvency practitioner or keeping a business rescue practitioner or an auctioneer accountable for his or her actions is to go to the professional regulatory body that we are obligated to form part of. I mean, without that, we cannot practice. And we subscribe to a certain code of conduct, and they can take internal disciplinary measures against us. And if they're successful, and I mean, there's a legitimate issue with something that we've done, they can revoke our membership, and by virtue of that, we'll use our licenses. So, if you're unhappy with the fact that I've been wasting a lot of your time with my blabbering, you can always go to Saripa. I see their banner is back there, and you can fill in a complaint form, ask for Angela, she knows me, and we can just take it from there. But, I mean, in closing, to the industry colleagues who may be present, even online, that makes it even better, I want to emphasize that each of us has a role to play in shaping the future of our profession. Every transaction we oversee, every process that we manage, is an opportunity to demonstrate our commitment to ethical practice and professional excellence. But so let us enjoy this auction, where every potential buyer in this room, online or over the phone, has the opportunity to participate. The rules are clear. I'm sure Greg will bore us with that later. And the outcome is not determined by backroom deals, but by the market itself. Therefore, I just want to thank you for actually your participation here today. Because whether you're just here as a potential buyer or interested party or an industry colleague, even your mere presence on here, online, being recorded, it gives legitimacy to the process. We have a paper trail of it, and you can keep us accountable for our actions here today. So, before I pass over to a Q&A session, I don't know if we have time. Yeah, we might have a bit. I just want to say thank you to Greg for having us, and thank you for the tremendous job you did for us a couple of weeks back. Post-auction negotiation really pushed it up, and we were happy to sign that deal off. And all this whilst I was chilling in France on leave. So thanks for Greg.